You're listening to the Deep Purple Podcast, a fan podcast about one of the most legendary bands of all time, Deep Purple. We take a look at the music, history, and people behind the band Deep Purple and beyond. Welcome to the Deep Purple Podcast, the first and only podcast devoted to one of the greatest bands in rock history, Deep Purple. Today's episode is episode number 37, The New Deep Purple. And coming to you from a state of rebirth in the suburbs of Chicago, I'm your host, Nathan Beaudry.
And coming to you from the suburbs of Providence, I almost forgot where I'm from, John Red Maple Matola.
I'm assuming that's the state tree.
Yes.
Now, how legitimate is it? When was that decided that would be the state tree?
All right, yeah, let me take this. It was not officially recognized as the state tree until 1964.
Still a little recent. I like.
Yeah, but older than us. So.
Yeah, and it's older than the state appetizer. I feel like maybe in like the 1800s or 1700s or 1600s they didn't have like state whatevers, so maybe.
Yeah, I don't know why. Yeah, honestly, like looking at all these, I'm kind of wondering why anything has to be a state anything.
This is a very good question, and that's a good topic for our spin-off podcast, the Rhode Island podcast.
I mean, I could see like having a state seal, like state flag, but then when you're getting down to like the state bird and the state, I don't know, maybe for a mascot, I guess, but after that it's kind of like I don't know,
I guess it'd be cool if they picked as a state bird like a bird that just isn't in that state at all. Like we just really like the golden condor. There aren't any in Rhode Island, but we're gonna just make that our state bird.
Or just like something completely whacked out and imaginary, like Big Bird.
I thought you were going to say like a phoenix.
Well, a phoenix, Big Bird. I mean,
that phoenix is in Warwick, the Phoenix Avenue, and they spelled Phoenix wrong.
P-H-E-N-I-X, Phoenix.
You assholes! You can't even spell Phoenix right. You shouldn't be naming your streets after them. So if you want to support the Deep Purple Podcast, the best way to do that is to give us a 5-star review in Apple Podcasts, or you can become a patron, or you can become a patron for as little as $1 a month. Writing us the review helps new people discover the show. Become a patron helps us cover any sort of costs we might have for the show. And then you can also subscribe on YouTube if you choose to look at our wonderful faces. And we're also on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Links to all that are at deeppurplepodcast.com. Speaking of patrons, we got a few patrons to thank in the $5 tier: Clay Wambacher and Steve Seaborg of nameonanything.com and alltheworldsastage.net. $3 tier: Peter Gardeau and Ian DeRosier. And at the $1 tier, Els Murders and Spacey Noodles. I like that the $1 tier is entirely made up names.
I didn't actually realize that.
I didn't realize that until just now. So yeah, if you're going to join the $1 tier, you have to make up a fake name. Assuming that Els Murders is not the God-given name of Els Murders.
And if it is, that's pretty cool.
That's a pretty awesome name.
Pretty badass.
Thanks to our brothers of the Deep Dive Podcast Network. That is Riot, Sabbath, Bloody Podcast, The Simple Man at Skinner Reconsidered, and the chairman, Terry T-Bone Mathley at T-Bone's Prime Cuts. And of course, as always, the patron saint and archivist of the Deep Purple Podcast, Jorg Planer, for all of his wonderful help and information. So yeah, this is our first proper show of 2020. A new year, a new lease on life. Any New Year's resolutions for you, John?
I'm gonna wait till you drink your beer because you'll spit it out all over the place.
All right.
No, actually, I don't have any. That's my whole point. I think I think New Year's resolutions are pointless.
Me too.
To be honest with you, because it's like if you look at all that stuff, like new year, new me, and everybody's that inspirational bullshit. First of all, and then the 20 I'm seeing a 2019. I can't wait for this shit year to be over with. and
every freaking year.
so it's like
2019, the worst year ever. Oh, I can't wait to put this behind me.
Yeah, 2020 is going to be my year. And then it's just like, I want to go back to like, your friggin' social media, like to a year ago when you were just like, 2018 blue chunks. I can't wait for 2019. It's going to be my bitch, and it's like,
and
so
then
many
invariably
people,
in the first like 3 weeks of 2020, we're going to lose like 3 like A or B level celebrities in a row within like between like January and February, and people are gonna be like, "Oh, 2020, the worst year ever!" Like, I can't believe these celebrities in their late 70s and early 80s are dying. Like that happened
it's
was
not
it like
funny,
David Bowie and Prince, and there was one other one that happened all at that time, and it was just like,
yeah,
yeah,
I remember.
they were all sad, but like, you've got a guy who's been chain smoking for 50 years, a guy who was abusing opioids. Terrible losses, great musicians, and it was a very, very sad, but it wasn't like,
is it really a surprise?
It wasn't these freak like, oh my God, how could this possibly have happened?
Like, wow, there was like somebody that was like 20 years old just died.
Yeah, exactly.
Type of thing,
You want to talk about tragedy? Yeah, if you're talking like Jeff Buckley or something, yeah, that's terrible tragedy. But
there was one that I had read about earlier this year. Cameron Boyce. Have you ever heard of him? He was like,
yeah,
he was 20 years old. He was on the Disney Channel, and he had he was like a seizure or something like that, and just like, just dropped, just died.
Yeah,
and
that was terrible.
Now that's sad, because it's just like, I was like, when I read it, I was like, sweet shit, it was like 20.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like, that's bad when it happens to anybody, but I mean, it's like when you hear about like, somebody that's like really young and hasn't even, had time to, accomplish more, that's just like even more sad,
somebody that had so much promise, even like obviously the, like Tommy Bolin, it was a terrible loss, and obviously it's, if people had been more aware of what was going on with him, it might not have been as much a surprise. Still a terrible tragedy and a terrible loss musically, and to think of what more he could have accomplished. But anyway,
the point being is that it's just like, that's going to happen in any year. There's going to be good and bad, and I feel like, we should focus on the good. And personally, I had a wonderful 2019, and there was some good, there was some not good, but I prefer to think of the good, and I think that this new year is going to be great as well. I mean, we're still alive. We're doing
we got this podcast off the ground in 2019, and that was something that just kind of came up all of a sudden, even though it's something we've been, a subject we've been talking about forever. So that was a great thing, and I'm sure 2020 will have plenty of good things. And you know what? My prediction for 2020, and I was really going to get into predictions. My prediction for 2020: some celebrities are going to die. It's going to be a mixture of extremely obvious, little Richard had his birthday a while ago.
Yeah,
I'm gonna pretend it's not today. Oh, little Richard just turned 87. When if somebody reaches that's like we talked about with going to see Deep Purple. Who knows how long they'll be around, either touring or something bad happens. Who knows? Things can happen quickly at that age, and hopefully nothing bad happens, but there will be some celebrity deaths, some more expected than others. You heard it here first.
Yep, there you go.
As far as updates for the show, we did, speaking of 5-star Apple reviews, we got one from Ya Buddy. I like that one. Makes me wonder, is it like actually a buddy of mine? Well, probably not, based on what it says. Review 5 stars. Finally, a Deep Purple podcast. Amazing work. Love the band. Love the music. Love the hosts of this podcast. Just like Black Sabbath sent me to Deep Purple, Sabbath Bloody Podcast sent me to this podcast. Up to Machine Head episode and loving every episode so far. Keep up the great work. So, thanks, you buddy.
Thanks. We love you too.
That's very nice. Tons of stuff coming in and came in and is still coming in about the Butterfly Ball episodes. A lot of like closet butterfly ball heads out there coming in.
Nice.
A comment from someone on YouTube named Aranea Push.
Ooh.
So, with a name like Aranea, probably a butterfly ball fan, but it's actually more interesting than that. So excited to find somebody who has explored the butterfly ball in depth. I have a dad who not only instilled in me the passion for music, but who also gave me a name from this album. Needless to say, I grew up with this music, but to this day, I never meet anyone who's ever heard of the butterfly ball, let
Wow.
alone listen to it. Thanks for taking the time to explore this.
Wow.
So I thought Aranea Push was like, oh, they named themselves Aranea because they're a butterfly ball fan, but they're actually named Aranea because their dad is a butterfly ball fan. That's pretty intense.
I'm surprised that you didn't name your daughter Aranea.
Yeah, well, yeah, now that if only I'd thought of that 5 years ago.
Or one of your sons, Old Blind Mole. Well, I mean, except we found out in the movie that he was an asshole, so that's probably...
That's true. That's true. But he
It
does
would've
leave
been
with the ladies at the end. What a commentary. Also, it's been a while since we did a proper episode, so this is kind of out of date, but we guested on Scott Haskin's podcast, Haskincast podcast, episode 84. It's great. I had a ton of fun talking with Scott. It was a lot of fun. And he tells an amazing Roger Glover story during the podcast. So don't listen for us. Listen for his amazing Roger Glover story.
And try saying that 5 times in a row fast.
What's it?
Scott Haskin, Haskincast podcast.
Scott Haskin's Haskincast podcast.
Haskincast podcast. I was like exhausted just hearing you say it. Oh.
Scott Haskin's podcast, the Haskincast podcast, episode 84.
Yeah, let's just say that once. That's enough. I can't say it anymore. It hurts my brain to try and think about how I'd say it. But it was a hell of a nice guy, and it was great being on his show. Hopefully we can have him on our show.
Yes, that would be great to reciprocate one. Organizing things between the 3 time zones was tricky, and that combined with the fact that I don't even really know how to do it on our end might slow that process down. But yeah, someday we'll have some guests. Also, discovered a one Judy Glover on Facebook, and I was like, is this the Judy Glover? And apparently it is. So I kind of just was like poking around, and I couldn't tell at first. I was like, well, she's from that same area, and then I discovered that she had posted something about from back in 2013. It came up, and it was this video of Love Is All, and she says, I'm so proud of Roger Glover's song, a great inspiration to us all. And what it is, and I'll put a link in the show notes, is a video of all children all around the world performing the song, and I guess they had all recorded their pieces separately and then spliced them together. So just gonna play a little snippet of it because it's actually pretty interesting.
Wow.
Yeah, little kids. They start with a very exotic Indiana. Less exotic even for me. Little Graham in Los Angeles, and then some children in Uganda singing the chorus. France, but they're not singing in French like your favorite version of the song.
Oh.
Kid playing the drums in Los Angeles. So it kind of just keeps bouncing around all the different kids all over the world singing the song. India, some kids from India singing. I thought it was kind of interesting and kind of cool. I definitely had missed this. It's quite old at this point. These kids are all adults now.
Oh, wow. Is that old?
At 2013, yeah.
Oh, okay.
These kids all look to be like 10 or whatever, so they're all adults. Some kid playing the sitar. So anyway, just thought it was an interesting video.
Yeah, it is.
If you're interested.
Jeez, that's pretty. That's one of those things where it's like you wouldn't think that the song was well known enough to get that kind of treatment.
Right. Yeah, but it is a great song. It works out really well for that, and the kids do a great job, honestly, because they're not only singing but they're playing all the instruments as well.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So, yeah, and then the last thing is Mo Foster had sent me a video, and I didn't have a chance to kind of clip the audio from it, but it's a video, unfortunately, I can't link to because it's kind of like a password-protected video he uses for publicity. So he said I could use it as long as I'm promoting the book. So maybe on the next episode I'll have like a snippet from it. But it's a talk he gave, and he's really funny. It's just basically him telling a lot of funny stories. And his book is British Rock Guitar by Mo Foster. And I highly recommend picking it up. It's just all sorts of course, I've got it upstairs. I should have brought it down here. All sorts of stories of guitar players in Britain and how they grew up. And the fascinating thing about it to probably our generation is them talking about like, oh yeah, you couldn't get a bass guitar in that day. So what I did was I took the body of a guitar and then cut off the neck of the guitar and stuck like a broom handle on there and put some string. All of these crazy stories about how they would, they plug into the back of a stereo. And during his talk, he talks about one like when the electric guitar first came out, like some guys like got the cable with the 2/4 inch ends, and they're like, oh well, this isn't going to work. So they cut off one of the ends, spliced it to like an actual plug to plug into the wall, and then plugged it into the guitar and into the wall. And Mo Foster's like saying like, I can't believe that more people didn't get really badly hurt.
Oh my God.
But just it's very funny for us to think about, having grown up just with this always being available and common knowledge, to just a generation earlier where they basically were creating and building their own. He talks about one of them is taking a double bass neck for a upright bass and attaching it to a guitar to create a bass, because you just couldn't get an electric bass back then, unless you were, a super well off person. Kind of like how Jimi Hendrix learned how to play on a right-handed guitar, because you had to know somebody to get a left-handed guitar in those days.
Jeez.
So, some really interesting stuff, and there's just, his book is loaded with stories, including the story of how at the Butterfly Ball, Vincent Price almost got locked overnight in the organ loft because they forgot about him up there. I wish I had known for our Butterfly Ball movie episode, but it's great. Yeah, they just accidentally like locked him up there for a while, and he almost had to spend the night in the Royal Albert Hall.
Oh, you say, help! Let somebody let me out. That's my best Vincent Price.
Would somebody with the keys go a wooing?
Help me, Froggy.
Froggy went a wooing.
Oh.
All right. So what are we here to talk about today? Well, with the new year and the rebirth of things, a lot of people would probably consider, hey, the rebirth of Deep Purple would be Perfect Strangers, right? That's when the Mark II lineup gets back together. But there was another episode in between Come Taste the Band and Perfect Strangers, which we will call the new Deep Purple. Some people call the bogus Deep Purple. Some people call the fake Deep Purple. But basically, if you're unfamiliar with it, this was a very brief iteration of the band, fronted once again by Rod Evans. And there's a lot of information out there. There's a great website, which is called it's at dpac.at/bogus_deep_purple_1980.html. And if you are someone who's been on the internet for a long time and like the glory days of the internet, this is a very old school website where you just basically if you just start hitting your scroll wheel, you'll be scrolling and scrolling for probably like 10 minutes before you hit the end of this page. Everything is on one page. It's a huge repository of photos and quotes and stories and pictures of concert ticket stubs, interviews, very well cited, very informative, really, really great stuff. But basically, this was an era of Deep Purple where I guess it's arguable that it was even Deep Purple. And do you remember the first time you ever heard of the new Deep Purple?
I haven't heard of it that much, but I remember, like, obviously it came up in our discussions and it re-entered my consciousness or whatever. But it's like before that, I think I remember kind of hearing about it a little bit, but then not really paying attention to it, because it's just like, oh, okay, it was just Rod Evans and some guys, and then they got a court order to stop or something like that, and so then nothing really happened, so then I just forgot about it. And it was like, oh, okay, that was kind of a weird story. But then when you told me, like, oh, this page actually exists or something, and I went and I checked it out, and I was like, wow, there was just like, it was like a whole thing for a little while.
Yeah, and I guess that's the thing that a lot of people don't understand. And again, we're not claiming to be the world's experts on this, but there's been websites floating around forever, since the internet was became, it came into everybody's homes basically. And I remember my parents getting the internet in the mid to early 90s and logging on to Fortune City. You remember Fortune City?
Oh
It was
man.
like an Angel Fire Fortune City. um
Yes.
and there was a Fortune City site that was like basically a Captain Beyond fan site that had a sub page all about the bogus Deep Purple, or the fake Deep Purple, or the new Deep Purple, whatever you want to call it. And there's been sites online forever, and the one I just quoted is the best one, probably with the most information.
Hmm.
If you grew up in an age where the internet looks the way it does now, looking at this, you'd probably be like, what am I even looking at? If you are, in your 40s, you'll probably look at this and be like, oh, I remember the days when every website looked like this.
The history books of the internet. It's
Exactly.
pretty much what
And
it is.
the Fortune City site is still available, but you have to go to like archive.org, use the Wayback Machine, and you can find some archived pages of it. But basically what happened, really, Reader's Digest version is the band reformed, sort of, with Rod Evans on vocals and 4 unknowns filling out the other music spots, by a management company who wanted to say, hey, nobody's doing anything with this Deep Purple name. Let's form the band and get them out there and, make some money for everybody. And then, long story short, they went out there, they toured for a few months all over North America, Canada, the United States, and Mexico, before they were finally shut down by Deep Purple's management, which still existed even though the band didn't. And basically, it's kind of become in smaller circles like kind of a running joke, or a kind of a punchline of the bogus Deep Purple. And we could just sit here for an hour and a half and poke fun at this lineup and this band, and but we talked, and we basically wanted to try to put a different spin on it. And not to say that we poke fun at everybody, so I'm sure we'll have a few laughs, but we really wanted to kind of break down the facts of this thing and kind of what could have been going on at this time to have made this seem like it was a better idea than it actually was.
Yeah.
So the way it started was sometime in 1980, this guy named Steve Greenberg, or sometimes known as Steve Green, he became interested in reforming Deep Purple in any way he could. And the first thing he did was pick up the phone and call Nick Simper. And Nick Simper just basically ignored it. He's like, no. He's like, I'm not. he's like, I'm not getting involved with that. He had already, he had been in Deep Purple. He had left. He had made the kind of ill-advised move of taking the lump sum, whatever it was, 10,000 pounds, and not going for the royalties. So he said, you know what? I'm not your guy for this. So then they approached Rod. And Rod had gone into the medical field at this point, and he had said, it came along at the right time because I was tired of what I was doing, towing someone else's line and working semi 9 to 5. I was ready for a change. So he was ready to get back out there, even though he'd kind of blown off Captain Beyond, like famously the group couldn't get in touch with him for their last album. So they just had to get a new singer because he wouldn't respond to any of their attempts at contacting him.
Wow, Rod ghosted. It's an early version of ghosting.
He totally ghosted Captain Beyond. But I guess he was ready to get back out there and start gigging. So they couldn't get Simper. So they had actually asked Rod, like, hey, can you convince Simper? And Nick Simper said in an interview that Rod had called him and left a message with his wife. And he said, no, I'm not calling him back. And he said later that he's like, it's probably a good thing that I didn't, because he would have gotten involved in a legal concern.
No, I got a question here I want to jump in with. This is like, so this guy, Steve Green or Greenberg,
mm-hmm.
what was his, did he have any connection to anything? Like,
No.
like Deep Purple? Like what did he just like? Did he like Deep Purple and was just like, hey, I want to reform them? Like,
I mean, and again, this is a way where people could just jump in and say, "Oh, it was a scam," and maybe there's some. All he wanted to do was make money, and I'm sure that was a big part of it. Don't get me wrong.
I mean, was he
I
a fan?
I don't know. I couldn't find a lot of information about him, but he was a manager with Advent Talent Associates in Phoenix,
Okay.
Arizona, and the tour management was through William Morris Agency, and he had previously formed a Steppenwolf band that was the same kind of deal, and two of the
Ah,
guys that would end up in the bogus Deep Purple came from that bogus or uh, remake
bogus
step.
Steppenwolf.
The Steppenwolf one's a little more complicated because it started out with, as far as I can tell, and my knowledge on Steppenwolf is pretty much non-existent. As far as I could tell, it started out with an actual member of Steppenwolf being involved, and
Yeah.
that person removed themselves. And Tony Flynn, who ends up playing guitar with Deep Purple, was in this sort of Steppenwolf band with an original member, and kind of basically became a de facto member of Steppenwolf, and then they
Okay.
kind of branched it out. And it's very interesting because this Steppenwolf band would sometimes open for the Deep Purple band. So it was kind of like all the same guys would just become they would here with Steppenwolf, and then they leave stage and come back 5 minutes later, and now we're Deep Purple. Um,
So I guess my other question is like, is there any info on whether they tried to contact like anybody else from Deep Purple other than Rod and Nikki? Like, I mean, even though all of them were doing stuff, did they think of like did they ever try and contact like Gillan or Ritchie or like Roger Glover or anything, or even Coverdale, like somebody like, or like what was their thinking behind like contacting two guys that were with the band like for 18 months and then they hadn't been in the band when they were successful?
I mean, that's a really great question. I haven't been able to find in my research um,
Yeah.
anything that would indicate that they did.
Hmm. I mean, my guess is that if they, because I mean, I had like read things too, like that there was a shady management company
Hmm.
that was trying to profit or make money off of like big name bands. So maybe they were trying to go after the lesser known members that were members nonetheless at some point, thinking that maybe they're affordable
Yeah, I mean, I would think that
or
that
they
would
would do
be,
it.
and I think that's your legal in too, is to just say, well, this is Deep Purple. It's got the original lead singer of Deep Purple. It's Deep Purple, but this is something that's, and I think putting yourself in the mindset, which is difficult for us because we weren't exactly great legal minds in 1980. We were alive. We weren't really thinking of things. We weren't really cognizant of this sort of thing, but later we would be in the later 80s and early 90s. And I mean, the parallel I draw a lot is the one with Pink Floyd. There was a big fight between Roger Waters goes off, and he was kind of the big driving force between those later very successful Pink Floyd albums. He goes off and does his own thing, and then the remaining three guys are doing their thing. So who's Pink Floyd? The three-quarters remaining of the band, or the guy who was probably the most influential in the songwriting process? And Roger Waters eventually lost that,
Hmm.
and Pink Floyd became, and in all honesty, became something different. It was, like people say, oh, Mark III, Mark IV Deep Purple. That's not real Deep Purple. Well, a lot of people say, well, post Roger Waters Pink Floyd isn't real Pink Floyd. And I I don't really like getting involved in those arguments, but I can see their points in both cases. The later Pink Floyd doesn't sound like that early stuff, and the same thing is true of Deep Purple when Gillan and Glover leave, and
Hmm.
later Blackmore. It doesn't sound like the same Deep Purple.
But I mean, it's really, I mean, if you're talking about it legally, I mean, the band is whoever controls the rights to the name.
Right, and in here, especially with Deep Purple, you're talking more about a management company. You're talking about HEC. You're talking
Right.
about Coletta and Edwards and all them, and
Right.
what they were the ones I think that were more upset. I was looking at in a famous interview with Ian Gillan just the other night, and the one where people, I think it was for the Infinite album, and they ask everyone the same questions. And one of the questions they ask is, how many records has Deep Purple sold? And Ian Gillan says something to the effect of, well, based on the royalties I've received, I'd say about 10 or 12. And it's one of those things where, the management company gets involved and takes up a lot of that. So I think the management company would have been more upset that there was someone else out there using the name Deep Purple,
making their money,
making money that should have been theirs, even though there was no one out there as Deep Purple to go out.
Right, but you figure that Coletta and all them, if they would be like, hey, if we wanted Rod to front a new Deep Purple, we're making the money off of it because that's our name,
right?
And that's our money to be made, not yours. Green.
And the second part of it being, if they're out there as Deep Purple and they're not putting out the level of product that they would expect from Deep Purple, that is also losing them money, because people might say, oh, Deep Purple, what the heck, what happened to them? Didn't sound like it did before.
And that could tarnish the image, which, who knows at that point if they thought, I mean, I don't know if anybody probably didn't think 4 years later that Mark II would reform and, have this second wave of success, but it must have been on their minds that that's still like a brand. And, even though the way that Mark IV ended wasn't really, really ceremonious, that probably, they probably thought, well, that was a great way to just like crap out this legacy, it's just like to end the way they did. But still, I mean, if you saw everything from the beginning up until then, I mean, they had a pretty great legacy. So my guess would be they were thinking like, oh, hell no, we don't want these people here ruining this and making this money and like, kind of tarnishing them, because they should also think about back sales too. I mean, they were probably making money off of like record sales and, memorabilia, whatever that was, they'd already put out.
And it's interesting the math is very simple, but this is only 4 years after the band broke up and 12 years after they started. So it's not a huge amount of time. I mean, you think about, 12 years ago in Deep Purple, what they were doing versus what they're doing now is almost identical. And things were moving a little more quickly back then for this band. So the other thing remains is, you've got a band at this time, Whitesnake, which is essentially is Deep Purple and could be considered Deep Purple in by all respects. You've got two original members of Deep Purple plus the second biggest singer for Deep Purple in being Coverdale. This could have been. It's interesting that they were going with Whitesnake, and at that point, when they reformed, why they weren't just saying, "Okay, this is Deep Purple Mark V."
Yeah.
But it's just kind of the way that things worked out. So anyway, that's kind of a long aside, but so anyway, Rod Evans is game. Simper says, I'll pass. Ends up being probably a good move on his part. And they recruit some other people. First off, they recruit Tony Flynn on guitar. Now, Tony Flynn was born in 1956 in San Francisco, and as a child, he was an actor, and he was in this movie trilogy called The Lemon Grove Kids Meet the Monster, playing the role of Pee-wee. And you can see this. I'll put a link in the show note. There's the video. It's not a super high quality movie, but in that time, I guess this would have been the early 60s. I'm sure it was probably pretty average for that time. I didn't watch a ton of it, but it's a kind of interesting that he started off as kind of acting. He started off also learning how to play guitar, got his first guitar really young, I think at the age of 9, he said. And he started doing session work really young. And in the 70s, he formed the Tony Flynn Trio. He was later in a band called the Naked Combo, I should say. He worked with Rick Derringer. And then he was also in a group called McJohn with John Mayall, though they would never play live. He was in a group called Goldie McJohn, and he was Goldie McJohn with a founding member of Steppenwolf, who was also in the group. I'm sorry, Goldie McJohn was the founding member of Steppenwolf, who was in the group. And then he was in a group called Southern Pacific, again with Goldie McJohn, and that's kind of where he gets that Steppenwolf connection. So Nick Simper says, I'm out. They recruit this guy, Tony. They did auditions, and Tom De Rivera ended up getting the gig on bass. He grew up in L.A. and was a founding member of the band Corroboree in 1968. And they were like a really big band in the early club scene in LA in the 70s. The drummer was Dick Jurgens III, who was the grandson of Dick Jurgens, who was a very famous and very well-respected big band leader and songwriter in the, I think, 1930s. He founded the Dick Jurgens Orchestra, obviously. Who else would have founded it? And because Dick Jurgens III, he had family connections, he'd actually gotten a backstage pass and met all the members of Deep Purple when they played California in the 60s. Later in the 70s, he was in a fake remake of the band Association. And then he would later rejoin the Steppenwolf remake band. So he was kind of involved in that remake scene. And apparently there was a lot of this going on at this time. A lot of bands that had fallen apart or gone by the wayside or withered away. And there were a lot of people trying to capitalize on that, saying, oh, there's a lot of people who still want to see the Association or Steppenwolf or Deep Purple, whoever it was. And that's why they got involved in these kind of deals. And then the final member that they recruited was Jeff Emery, and he was on keyboards. Born in 1951, his first real credit was with the new Steppenwolf act, and it was also reported that he was part of an Iron Butterfly remake band.
Jeez.
I guess this was before they had cover bands. I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't just make a cover band.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess it goes back to like, you know, how would if you publicize something as, hey, it's Iron Butterfly, or hey, it's Deep Purple, like the people would go and see, and then they'd be like, you know, look up at the stage and be like, who the fuck are all these people?
Yeah.
You know, if they were big fans of them, as opposed to like if you're like, hey, like the, you know, Iron Butterfly cover band, and people, yeah, I don't want to go see that. So maybe kind of the deception, so to speak, or
Yeah.
like or the kind of leaving out of some information might draw some people in.
Yeah, it just seems like you're really setting yourself up for disappointment and upset people, which which is obviously what happens in this case. There's a lot of people. There's a lot of people who are fine with it, and there's a lot of people who are upset. But I mean, cover bands are very lucrative these days. Our friend Scott, who we grew up with, has been in a cover band now for 20 years. I mean, they tour all over the United States. They're super popular. They are a cover band for a band that hasn't been around for over 20 years. I don't know why I'm being so like secretive about what it is.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what's a band?
Well, I guess, yeah, I don't, there's no reason not to say it, but Badfish, the Sublime cover band.
Yeah, no, I'm.
No.
Oh, well, oh, actually, wait a minute. Yeah, I've heard the name
Yeah.
before. That's his band, right?
Yeah, he's been in it he started it 20 years ago almost.
Well,
I
that's
think they
probably why
started
I
in
heard of it.
2000. So yeah, 20
Probably
years.
heard of it through you, and I'm actually surprised it's still around. But yeah,
it's his only source of income. He supports a family on it, and I'm sure he wouldn't mind me saying that. I'm not going to go into figures. I don't have them, so I couldn't go into them if I wanted to. But he's supporting a family, and on the income he's making from touring around with this band, and they honestly provide a really great product. I'm kind of sick of that band now from hearing their music so much. And
yeah.
I went to a lot of their early shows, and honestly, they probably do a better performance than the original band did when they were around. And they've certainly been practicing the music for longer than that band ever did, unfortunately, due to sad circumstances. But yeah, so there's a lot of that kind of shows, I think, how the market has changed over the years, and that there's all of these cover bands now that are like kind of proud cover bands, and this is what we do. And there's huge cover bands who this is their main source of income, and they do these great performances. Back then, I think it was more about like, oh well, let's get Rod Evans and call it Deep Purple because he was in Deep Purple. Unfortunately, legally, there are more implications than that. So the band gets together, and they I think that one of the quotes I read was, Oh, where is it? I don't know if I had it here. Let me see if I can find it. Oh yeah, here it is. I think he's talking about the Steppenwolf rehearsal, saying that this guy Kane, who I guess was in the band, but he's not in the Deep Purple band. He said that the group kind of put them together to emulate Steppenwolf, and he said that they just got this band together, and he said they never had full scale rehearsals. He says, quote, "We just learned the songs off of Steppenwolf's greatest hits album." They just played the greatest hits album, taught themselves the songs, and they're like, okay, we're ready to go. So it kind of gives you an idea of kind of what they were getting into. So they get this group together, they start touring around. Like I said, they're touring Canada, America, and they're touring Mexico. So I do have a clip of audio from one of their shows in Mexico, and this was actually on Mexican TV. And this is a clip. It's actually kind of a longer clip. I'm just going to play a little snippet of it here, which is them. It's a kind of a lead-in, and it's all in Spanish. So if you speak Spanish, great. If not, you might be a little lost, but I'll try to narrate here. Not that I can translate, but it will. It kind of sets up what's going on with the band, and then you get to hear a clip of them playing "Smoke on the Water." So here we go. So it starts off actually playing a lot of audio from the original Deep Purple, but right around here.
Looks like a lot of people.
Oh yeah, they got huge crowds. On this particular show, I think there was somewhere between like 30 and 70,000 people. So they're showing Rod Evans now, and they're kind of saying.
Si a esto agregamos que como guitarrista, en vez de Ritchie Blackmore, venía Tony Flynn, quien ya
they say replacing Ritchie or playing the part of Ritchie Blackmore, I guess, is Tony Flynn. They show Tony Flynn there playing the guitar.
Sacamos en conclusión que el Deep Purple que vino a México, que incluía además al organista Jeff Emery, al bajista Tom de Rivera y al baterista Dick Jurgens, no fue ni la sombra del grupo original. A continuación les presentamos también un valioso testimonio de esta actuación del sábado 28 de junio de 1980 en el estadio Inde.
But right now they're playing original Deep Purple, so they're original Deep Purple audio. So here we go. Great hearing Rod get the crowd riled up.
Jeez, Rod didn't even dress up for this.
He's got jeans and a t-shirt.
Wow, I guess that answers the question as to what would Mark II have sounded like if Rod stuck around with them.
Yeah, right? So, people slag off the band, and I mean, I honestly don't think they're that bad. I mean, it's... And from everything I've read, it sounds like the main issue people had with their sound was the equipment, like things breaking down, microphones not working, things like that. But when you can actually hear the audio, it's hard to emulate Deep Purple, who was probably five incredibly gifted musicians. These guys are not doing a bad job.
No, but I mean, I think that maybe the reason that people rag on them so much is because, I mean, if you compare this to the 5 musicians that were actually in Mark II, it doesn't even come close. But I mean, standalone, if you went to see this in as like a Deep Purple cover band, yeah, it's not bad.
Right.
I mean, this is not not anywhere near as good as the Five Guys if you're drawing a comparison. And I think that's what a lot of people are doing. It's like, oh, it's not Gillan, Glover, Blackmore, you know.
Well, you also have to realize that this was obviously pre-internet days, and people heard that Deep Purple were coming around, and it wasn't like everyone was tapped into social media and knew what the deal was. They were just like, oh crap, Deep Purple. Like, there were probably people out there that didn't know Deep Purple had even broken up, or people that did and just thought, oh, they've gotten back together. This guy, you know, Jeff Emery's doing a good job on the keys. John Lord is one of a kind, so. Rod Evans looks like he's like taunting him.
He looks like he's taking a break.
He's like, come on, play that keyboard.
To me, it looked like he put his arms on. He was like, oh, I need to rest. I'm out of breath.
He hadn't played in a while there. Like, oh, this song's a lot harder to sing than Mesmerization Eclipse. But yeah, I can imagine just seeing, like, you know, being a Deep Purple fan in any country, but especially a non-English speaking country, just like, oh wow, Deep Purple's coming around. I'd love to go see them. There's one line that Rod gets. I don't know if it's on this recording. He gets the line wrong.
He just did.
Was it?
He did.
What did he say?
He mixed up a few red lights and a few old. He said it backwards.
He says, I don't know. Again, I don't know if it's on this recording, but he says, but with the Rolling Stones truck thing just outside. It's like he had the idea.
Come on, that's funny.
That's great.
Oh, Jesus.
I forgot to listen to see if it was actually on this one. It's funny they didn't do a guitar solo, they just did the keyboard solo.
Yeah.
So that must have been their closer.
You're not very good at operator, but...
Oh, this is funny. That goes into this interview. Watch this.
Every now and again to do something different, you know.
Hablamos de cuestiones que de pronto les tocan hacer distintas. En este caso, ¿verdad?
So it's
la banda de rock.
It's Ian Gillan being interviewed on Mexican TV and
by a clown.
By a guy like in a clown, like big green hair, bald head, and a big red nose. And Ian Gillan is just completely straight faced talking to this guy like he's not dressed like a clown.
This joy. Yes, of course, yeah. The first thing is the music, you know.
Sorry,
we're
I'll
like
stop
a family.
that. We don't need to get into that, but
Well, I mean,
I forgot that was also on this recording.
Well, I mean, you're also talking about Ian Gillan. He's always been kind of a strange fellow, so he's probably didn't even faze him at all. He's just like, yeah, you look like bozo. Like, I'll talk to you in a serious fashion.
Yeah, the guy's dressed like kind of like a cross between a hobo and a clown, and he's asking all his questions, and a guy translates for him, and then Ian Gillan is answering him like, well, yes, let me tell you about the writing process, as if the guy's not a clown. So yeah, so their tour schedule, I'm going to put a link in the show notes of their tour schedule, but it basically went all over. Their first show was in Amarillo, Texas in May of 1980. They played all over Texas, went down through California, down to Mexico City, which is that, I believe is that show that we just saw there. Came back up, they played Hawaii, Minnesota. Like, these tour dates are all over the place. Hawaii, Minnesota, Dallas, New York City, back up to Canada, Ontario. They played a very famous show in Quebec, and that's where some of the, a lot of eyewitness testimony, and there was this guy Yves Monsat that was at the show who wrote in French some reviews of the show and stuff, and he took a ton of pictures. So there's a lot of really pretty good quality pictures from that show. They played in Anchorage, Alaska, down the West Coast, and it looks like their last show was the 20th of September, also back in Quebec. So they played a show in Massachusetts, Hartford, Massachusetts, and Somerset, and then ended in Quebec.
Wow.
So all in the year 1980. So it looks like 30-something
Yeah.
shows.
Yeah, that's a lot of traveling too. I mean, sounds like they went everywhere.
And this site is great. Again, a link in the show notes, but if you check it out, I believe it's a German website that has all sorts of information about tour dates, and it has them broken up. Mark 1, 2, 3, 4, new Deep Purple, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Or you can sort by year, and then and each one of the shows listed where it was, information about the show. And if you click, some of them are links. If you click on the link, it will open up with their set list and or who they played with, or have a picture of the ticket stub. So pretty interesting site. Really, tons of great information there. So they do this tour schedule, and on this dpac.at site, they have some selected quotes and some quotes from people that were at the show. One person says, the next act was introduced as Steppenwolf. They did a selection of Steppenwolf songs, including Magic Carper Ride and Born to Be Wild. When they finished, the lead singer came out to introduce Deep Purple. I noticed that the same band came out and performed as Deep Purple. That's by John Trask via email on this site. Someone else says, it was already dark when they announced the arrival of Deep Purple. The announcer had no idea than to ask us to light our lighters to receive the musicians. So people started to burn everything they had nearby, stands, posters, everything. In the middle of that general fire, the magic chords surrounded chan, 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 chan. I'm assuming that's what he's doing. I forgot everything and joined the crowd singing Smoke on the Water to screams. So that's by Nicholas Gadano. It sounds like he had a positive experience there. Somebody says, the keyboard player, who must have been playing all of 2 weeks, has captured John Lord's actions well. The drummer is pretty good and did the synth work in Space Truckin'. So it's somebody kind of slagging on the keyboard player, but says he does it really well. So what else do we have? People say that there was a really long drum solo. The drum solos were just kind of crazy. Someone else says, I'll never forget that. The show I attended lasted less than a few minutes. When the lights went on and there was no Ritchie, the crowd went ballistic, which quickly turned into a riot. That show took place at the Factory on June 17th, 1980 in Staten Island. Well, that was a long time ago, and it was a different state of mind that night, but I distinctly remember the band coming on stage, although very briefly sans Ritchie. It was a packed house, and the crowd immediately went apeshit and started screaming for Ritchie, and within a minute or so, beer bottles started flying toward the band members. It quickly turned into a chaotic scene, so I don't recall for sure, but I believe a few of them were hit and injured. And if that wasn't bad enough, things only escalated once the bouncers tried to intervene, not that they even had a chance. It was a night that I'll never forget.
Wow.
Then there's some example set lists. So here's an example of a set list that they would have performed on the show. So they started with 3 Mark I songs: Hush, Hey Joe, and Kentucky Woman, all covers. And then they go into Highway Star, Smoke on the Water, and Space Truckin'. Then there's a drum solo, and they do Woman from Tokyo and Might Just Take Your Life.
That well, you know what? If I'm not wrong, weren't all those Mark II and III? Weren't those all singles?
Yeah, and Might Just Take Your Life was too.
Yeah, that's why I said that, because Might Just Take Your Life, I was kind of like, that's an interesting choice. But then I think I remember that was like an A-side or a single.
And they would also play Ring That Neck. And it's interesting because some of the American people who have quoted on it said, oh yeah, they played Hard Road, because you remember it was renamed Hard Road because Americans couldn't deal with Ring That Neck.
Oh no.
And oh my goodness, scandalous.
Oh.
So
God, skirts above the ankle. Huh?
But yeah, in the Quebec show, there's a quote. Somebody quotes Rod Evans as saying, "This is a song off of our Burn album," which is kind of a funny thing to say, given that he had nothing to do with the Burn album.
Well, since none of them had anything to do with the Burn album, like that's
Yes. I mean, I guess he had more to do with it than anything because he was in Deep Purple. But very interesting time period.
Yeah.
That would happen, and that like I said, might just take your life. The fact that they did anything by Mark III was pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's kind of unexpected. But it sounds like they were going for pretty much all the hits or all the popular songs. Because I mean, the first three that Rod was actually on were all the covers. Then the Machine Head songs were all the hits or the popular songs, and then the last two were the last two popular songs, really. And then they were probably wise not to touch anything from Mark IV.
What would they have done?
Like Getting Tighter.
Getting Tighter would have been great. This is a song of our Come and Taste the Band album. It's called Dealer.
Well, Getting Tighter is just like when nighttime comes and I'm 10,000 miles away. It's
hey!
Like, all right. Hey! All right, Rod. Take it easy. Get up, keep in line.
Back and play.
I'm getting tighter. Whoa. Whoa. Like, what would he do the Glenn Hughes parts? You wouldn't even be able to.
where Glenn Hughes goes, whoa! Right before the breakdown, you just go, whoa.
He's like, whoa.
We love you, Rod.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's the thing is like he was like that just blows my mind. He was so friggin' good in Captain Beyond.
Absolutely insanely good. And the fact that he didn't pursue it anymore after that. Like we talked about on our Captain Beyond episode, I think they said they only played like a total of maybe, I forget what it was, 30 shows or 60 shows, or whatever it was a low number.
Yeah, like I feel like without knowing anything, I mean, if Rod maybe thought that this was going to be a payday because there was name recognition behind Deep Purple and there was none behind Captain Beyond, might be the reason why he wouldn't have done that. But I would have rather seen him do another Captain Beyond album.
Oh my God, I would have loved to see Captain Beyond and have another album or see them live.
Or him just do more of his own stuff in that same vein, like a Rod Evans solo album, or
I just get the impression from Rod. Of course, it's all guesswork on our part, but I just get the impression that just his heart wasn't ever really in it. Like this wasn't his dream or wasn't his like main driving force in life. You know what I mean? I think if he had more drive or more like desire to have done this, I don't think there would have been any stopping him. I just get the impression he's just like, you know what? It's fun, but like I just don't think he had that drive that a lot of the more successful musicians have.
Well, I mean, the fact that he like came out of like he was in the medical field for crying out loud, and then he came out of it and he was dressed like he was like, like going into his garage to work on his friggin' car. He didn't even dress up like a rock star.
Well, there's those shots, those pictures, and of him dressed like the spaceman sort of outfit.
Yeah,
you've seen those, right?
I think so. Yeah. Now that I think of it,
he looks like a spaceman. Of course, I can't find one now, but there's him in that spaceman outfit.
Oh, but anyways, so what happens with the new Deep Purple after they tour around for the U.S. and Mexico and Canada and all these other places?
Well, let's see. So there's quite a bit of press starts developing as these people play more and more shows. People get more and more catch wind of it. Here's an article from the Daily Record, July 18th, 1980. So they would have been out there for a couple months yet. It says, a band billed as Deep Purple was scheduled to perform last night at the Factory, a club located on Staten Island. The band will appear Sunday at Baby O in Seaside Heights. What does this Deep Purple have in common with the band recorded Smoke on the Water and Burn? Don't ask the band's old record company, Warner Brothers. We don't know anything about this group, said Marion Perkins, director of East Coast tour publicity for Warner's. Don't ask Capitol Records, the label to which current Deep Purple is supposedly signed. Deep Purple is not on Capitol, said the spokeswoman in the company's publicity department. John Salvato of Talent Spectrum made the claim that they were signed to Capitol. The article goes on to talk about the sold-out show in Mexico, 38,000 people, and it grossed $342,000. So there's some serious money coming in $1980.
Wow.
I mean, obviously that's the gross, but still pretty good chunk of money from ticket sales. And then the article concludes with, so the question remains, who is this Deep Purple, and do they have the right to use the band's name? Salvato's only comment on that issue is, I'm not sure of the legalities. So that's one take. There's also another article here from August 9th in the Reno Gazette. And this article says, has a quote from Ritchie Blackmore. And Blackmore says, I think it's pretty disgusting that a band has to stoop this low and take somebody else's name. It's like a bunch of guys putting together a group and calling it Led Zeppelin. Roger Glover says, people are paying good money to see something that isn't what it's purported to be. Even though Rod was in the band originally, it's not really the band that people know. And then there's another quote that says, Tony Flynn contends that this group sounds exactly the same and looks exactly the same. In all respects, we are the same product. Flynn also asserts that he acquired the right to use the Deep Purple name from the group's old manager, John Coletta, and its accountant, Bill Reed. Reed and Coletta, of course, do not agree with that and denied it. And it's worth noting that Jeff Emery was also an attorney, the keyboardist, and he supposedly said he had secured the rights to the name and all that, but that just, there's a lot of layers to this, and I don't know who's actually to blame, but there's a lot of people claiming things that just didn't end up being true. Then there's another one here. What is this? This is from the Los Angeles Times. And the Los Angeles Times says, to most rock fans, Deep Purple means Ritchie Blackmore, John Lord, and Ian Gillan, all best known for their work with the heavy metal supergroup. But none of those stalwarts will be on stage when the band headlines the Long Beach Arena on August 19th. In fact, no one seems to want to reveal just who is in Deep Purple these days. The group has been playing concerts all around the country despite the presence of only one original member, singer Rod Evans. And then it goes on to say how they were going to reveal the band's identity later on. So it's starting to get out there in the press that this is what's going on. And they start playing shows. And in one of the shows, they put out an ad and say in the ad, like, oh, hey, we're going to be playing at this whatever. And where is it here? There's a thought I had it here. So basically the actual Deep Purple management company takes out an ad and says, right in the same page that the ad for this show is, and here it is. So this is a good one. So on this page is a ad. I'll share with you right here. An ad for the show. It says Deep Purple featuring Rod Evans, but the real Deep Purple management takes out a huge ad that says the following stars will not perform at the Deep Purple concert at the Long Beach Arena: Ritchie Blackmore, David Coverdale, Ian Gillan, Roger Glover, Glenn Hughes, they spell his name wrong, John Lord, and Ian Paice. So they are trying to counteract the fact that these people are it says right there in the ad, the new Deep Purple featuring Rod Evans, but they were concerned because they'd been getting word that so many people were talking about, hey, this isn't the real Deep Purple or the Deep Purple that I was expecting. So they kind of put it out there that to warn people that this is not what they were going to be getting.
Right. And that actually makes me think of something like, we were talking about how this is kind of predates like stuff that's happened in recent years with like a version of the band or even two versions of a band existing at the same time, which this is like, that actually wasn't the problem then, because it wasn't like Mark II was touring and, you know, then Rod Evans is like on the other side of the country touring on this too. But, you know, there were, you know, there were in the recent years, like two versions of Rat and like two versions of Great White and two versions of LA Guns. And in some cases, even like Quiet Riot, which is like, has only Frankie Benali performing in it. He wasn't even the original drummer. He was just the best known drummer. So that just kind of raises all these questions of like, so who is even the real band?
Yep.
And I think a lot of people go for expectations, and there was a episode of, and I mean, a lot of it is legalities too. Like there was a famous, or, you know, a while ago was much talked about too, that there were 3 original members of Rat contesting against the drummer who went out with his own version of Rat, that they owned the name, and he said he owned the name, and I guess it wound up getting settled in court that it went to the 3 other members and that he couldn't use it anymore because they were just like, you're tricking people, you know. There's like the guitar player, one of the guitar players, the vocalist, and the bass player, which you can argue that, you know, a drummer going out kind of like Quiet Riot is not the original band, because I mean, you know, who do you want to go see? Do you want to go see the voice of the band or the guitar player? Those are the most, you know, I think instantly identifiable people in a band. I mean, if you ask me anyways, but there was, I can't remember who, but there was a like Eddie Trunk interview a while ago where he talked about the same topic, where it's just like, even if you go on bands' websites, like you can't really find out like who's in the current version of the band, because I think what this, you know, speaks to is like expectations, which is I think why the management company took out that ad, because it's like, if you're going to see Deep Purple, and I mean, even now it's just like, it's hard enough, like hey, who's in the band, and you go to the band's website or whatever, and sometimes they don't even list, like it's not up to date, you don't even list all the original members, and you're going to see, you know, you're going to see Deep Purple because you want to see Ritchie.
Yeah.
And these people show up and they're just like, okay, well, where's Ritchie?
Right.
They're going to be pissed and, you know, wonder like, where's my money? Like, where did my money, what did I spend my money on? Like, this is not what I expected. And so I feel like, you know, in a way that this version of Deep Purple, they weren't exactly like saying, hey, we're doing things shoddily and secretly, but they weren't not saying it.
Yeah, and it's,
you know,
it's a really hard legal question in a lot of cases. I mean, I don't think in this case it was very difficult. I think it was, you know, again, we're trying to give everyone the benefit of the doubt. I don't know that anyone in the band necessarily thought or went into this with bad intentions or like they were doing anything wrong. And by all accounts, Rod Evans' kind of take on it was, hey, they haven't been doing anything with the name. I'm the original singer. I'm going to reform it. And, you know, it's just not that simple. It's not that easy in that business. But there are other ones, like the Pink Floyd one, which is, that's a tricky one. And I think they just kind of went with, well, 3 of the original members are here. And even though it doesn't really sound like it used to sound and the songs are different, that's what they went with. And,
well, yeah, I mean, it's whoever controls the name,
right?
Legally.
It's a very difficult thing, and we even within the Deep Purple community, there's, like we talked about, those people who argue like, oh, Mark III isn't real Deep Purple or Mark IV isn't real Deep Purple, and you know, because it's a huge departure. And at what point is a band no longer a band? And like I think we talked about earlier, or not on the show, but earlier in general, I think it's Foreigner that might be the band that has no original members left. So at
it
what
is
point,
one of those bands, yeah, I think
it's a matter of the number of members, and then over time, how many of them are retained, and how quickly does it happen, and all that. I think over time, you could gradually get to a point where there was no one in the band. You know, like what happens when You know, what if if something happened to Ian Paice and they had to replace him in the Long Goodbye tour? Is that still Deep Purple? There's now officially no original members. I mean, I think most people would say yes, it's still Deep Purple because it's retained enough. But what would happen if Ian Gillan, Roger Glover, and Ian Paice all called it quits or whatever, and Steve Morse and Don Airey wanted to replace all three of them? Would that be Deep Purple? You know, what's the breaking point at which it's not the band anymore?
Well, now they could do that, because there are some instances where bands have, where there's been, and again, this happens so much but I know that it has happened. I can't remember what band it is, where there are some band members where there's like, you know, like a band member that controls the name and runs things, but prefers not to be a touring musician. So they have a version of the band that goes out with their blessing and plays all the popular songs and puts on the show and everything like that. And they just, you know, they sit back and they run things from almost like a management point of view. And they, you know, are, you know, like a controlling shareholder in the, you know, the company, so to speak, and they're still making the money off it, even though they're not performing. And I think that that's what Kiss is angling to do someday. A lot of people talk, like when Gene and Paul decide to call it quits, like, you know, most people are speculating like they're going to keep the name. They're going to keep making money off of it because and I mean, of course, with them, it goes beyond, you know, actual touring, because they do the cruise. And I mean, I think that they're going to keep doing the cruise even if they don't perform on it, because that's something that people will shill out for just because it's a great time. But
well, it's a brand at that point.
Exactly.
You know, it's just like a show that's been on Broadway for 20 years. You know, there's none of the original cast are still in it, but it's let's keep that, you know, event alive, and that whatever it is, that keeping the show alive, and they could very well do it with Kiss, especially with the makeup. It's even easier to make it kind of feel like it's still going.
Which for a lot of people come to these shows and come to see like the hits or the popular songs or the songs they know, and like there are like diehards like us that we know, like let's get back to Deep Purple and say like we know Ian and Roger, and we want to see them on stage. And even like Steve Morse at this point has been with the band so long, we're like, yeah, that's our Deep Purple now and everything. But those guys, like you said, like what if they all wanted to retire? They could retire and just like they could audition and hire a bunch of like really great talented musicians, like even well-known people, to go out and tour as Deep Purple. They could do that if they wanted.
Sure.
You know, and they could be like, you know, and that could be the new Deep Purple, or Deep Purple the Next Generation, or Mark 11, or whatever they are.
Deep Purple the Next Generation. I think we're all well past the Next Generation.
Or the Mark.
Yeah, the third generation. We skipped over the second.
Yeah, or just whatever it is. But I mean, you know, they could do a Vegas residency. They could, you know, you said they could make it like a Broadway show. They could do whatever they want with it. You know. But I mean, it depends on like, you know, would people accept like a Deep Purple with no original members? Like that would be their business decision.
And I think it's kind of like the Dio hologram that's kind of testing the boundaries of what people will accept, and it's very divisive. And you know, we've talked about it extensively on the show, and you've seen it. It's some people are just so against it and hate everything about it, and some people are accepting it for what it is. And I think if you accept it for what it is, which is, you know, if there was a Deep Purple that, say, 10 years from now, I'm assuming, although I should never assume because we would have said this 10 years ago probably, I'm assuming that in 10 years Deep Purple as we know it now is not going to be still performing. Now, what if they put together some sort of thing and they got some new members or whatever it was to put on a show out there? There'd be people all up in arms. It's not real. It's not, if it's not Ian Gillan, it's not Deep Purple, whatever it is, whatever have you. And it's the same thing with that Dio hologram. People get really bent out of shape. But if you're honest about what it is, if they say, oh, we've replaced Ian Gillan with Sebastian Bach, I don't know, and Roger Glover with whoever, and we're still touring out there. If you go there accepting and knowing what it is and pay your money based on that, then I don't see there's any problem with that. as long as you're not trying to trick people.
Right, exactly. I mean,
And it's the same thing with Dio. If you're thinking Dio is going to be there, then that's kind of on you. And if you're unhappy that's not as good as a live human being there, well, like, I don't know what to tell you, but you kind of know what you're going into. So you're not getting duped, you're not getting ripped off. You're either choosing to go or choosing not to go.
Well, yeah, they called it the hologram, and it's like, and when I went to see it, I was like, I knew everything except how good or realistic the hologram was going to be.
Right.
And my gripe with it is that they should have worked on it longer, or they should have done something different with it, because however they designed it, it's like the movements that the hologram was making was not like the way that Dio moved. And that took me out of the moment. It's just like breaking the fourth wall. You know what I mean? It's just like, I'm like, this doesn't really seem like Dio. Like, I feel like if you want to do it, then do it all the way. And it's just like, he was making these really just like, they made him move really weird. Like, I can't get over it. I mean, like, the vocals sound great because it was from actual shows that he recorded, and the band was awesome because they're all great musicians, and the stage show was awesome. And they even had, a big, screen in the back where, like, during some songs they were playing old concert footage. And I was like, I would almost prefer that they would play old concert footage of Dio singing with the vocals over it, and, and the live band performing and everything, because at least you could look at it and be nostalgic about it.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, it's, but I mean, I didn't go there being like, oh, it's going to be perfect and it's going to be just like Sid, because I mean, I saw him live like a bunch of times before he died, and it was like, I knew it wasn't going to be like that.
Sure.
And I mean, it would be the same thing as like when you and I went to the current Deep Purple show, we know that Ian Gillan was not going to be singing Child in Time.
Right.
Or even like in that style anymore. And what we got was not disappointing.
No, it was great. And great job for what it is, if you're being honest with yourself about what to expect. But if we had gone in there and say, oh, he didn't deliver like he did 50 years ago, then that's on us. I can't believe he didn't sing just as good as he did 50 years ago, or I can't believe they didn't play Child in Time. Like, you know these things going into it.
Yeah, he's like, he's in his 70s and he didn't sound like he did when he was 28. That son of a bitch.
Like I said, the fact that at 74 that he could go and stand up on stage that long is a freaking miracle. My parents are that age, and I don't know that they could have gone and stood on stage, not singing, not playing instruments, just standing for that long without needing to sit down or something. So good for them.
I went out to lunch with my dad the other day, and he had to go take a nap afterwards. All right. I mean, he's just like, oh, this is too much for me.
Yeah. My parents come and visit, and they sit around and play with the kids, and then, they do that thing where, like, oh no, I'm not sleeping. And they're just like in the chair, their head all the way back, mouths open, oh, I wasn't napping, I just had my eyes closed for a little bit.
So I mean, God bless these guys for like still doing it. I mean, we don't know what goes on behind the scenes. I mean, that they probably like get prep, they probably have like chiropractors, massages,
I should hope. They probably, if not, they deserve it.
Yeah, but like stuff to get them ready. Like I read something a while ago about like I mean, hardcore, even Metallica still looks these days, and they're just like, oh yeah, like we can't go out there and do that show without like doing some like PT like 3 times a week, like, and getting like massages and having like cortisone shots probably, and like I remember James Hetfield going through this list of stuff. It's just like, yeah, we can't go out there without doing a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, I got to do my physical therapy just to empty the dishwasher, never mind performing on stage.
So I mean, I think a lot of people have to remember like that as well, since now we're getting into like when performers get older, and we've just like veered away from the original topic. But yes. I think there was like a Super Bowl performance or something like that, and it was like a while ago, and it was like Madonna was on it, right?
Yep.
And people were like criticizing her performance, and I'm just like, dude, like this lady is like at the time I think she was like 50 years old, and I'm just like, you go up there and do that. It's like, I'll respect somebody that's like, in her 50s, and she was still doing these like crazy dance moves. And I mean, that's stuff that you can't lip sync or, fake or whatever on live TV. And so I'm just like, props to people that go up there and still keep doing it.
it's always the people that aren't doing anything that are quick to criticize. It's like they that man in the arena quote from I think it's Teddy Roosevelt. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
I might be if you.
It's like the man in the arena. What does he say? I'm looking it up real quick. The man in the arena. He says, "Come on. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat."
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's always the case. It's always just these chumps sitting by the sideline whose greatest achievement that week was, watching the latest Game of Thrones or whatever. Like, like I saw the latest episode of The Mandalorian, and that's the best thing I did this week. Now I'm going to criticize some I've never stepped on a stage, I've never played an instrument, I've never put myself out there. I'm going to just sit here and criticize a freaking 74-year-old person who's given everything they have to just get out there and keep doing it day in and day out and get something done.
Right. And that I guess we can bring it back to new Deep Purple, right? Is
Yes.
like I guess in light of that just makes me think you got to give Rod and all those guys credit, because I mean, they went out there and did that, and I mean that what is it, $300,000 that they grossed? I mean that's not chump change in 1980 money. So I mean, It's just like whether they you could argue whether they tricked people or not. People still went, and you read some positive reviews, you read a couple of negative reviews, but I mean, it's just like, hey, he rolled the dice and they gave it a shot.
They did it. They played in front of huge crowds and got a lot of attention. And, if they had been a complete disaster and had fallen apart, we would probably not even know about it. But the fact that they got to the point basically where Deep Purple was like, no, we have to shut this down.
They got enough attention and were probably making enough money where the real management company had to be like, we can't let this happen anymore. So I mean, you gotta figure like, hey, they were doing something, and I mean, it's, if you think about it, it takes some courage too for Rod. He was like, hadn't been on stage, let's say, in like several years, and was like just working like a 9 to 5 like we are, and then all of a sudden it's just like, hey, you want to go back on stage? And I mean, that can't be an easy thing.
No, I mean, I haven't been on stage in a lot longer than that, and I'm a lot probably, maybe Brett, I don't know how old he was at that time, but yeah, if you called me now and says, hey, do you want to be in your same exact band you were in the last time you were on stage? I'd be like, oh man, I'm gonna have to hit the gym.
But I mean, all those guys, you gave backgrounds on them and stuff, like even I think, was it who's the guitar player? Tony Flynn.
Yep.
Yeah, and he was actually, you said that he was like done session work and stuff with some pretty like notable people. Like there were some names, John Mayall, and
I'll play some more of his recent stuff later too. And he's no slouch. But one last newspaper article here. It says Purple Pose, Rock or Xerox, and this is from the Los Angeles Times, again written by Patrick Goldstein in late August of 1980. Goes through a few things. Talking about the shows, about how they had some of the guys had been in the previous Steppenwolf arrangement, and one of the things it says at the end, it says, one rock businessman, a Colorado-based promoter, washed his hands of the whole matter. According to the promoter, Emery earlier this year offered him either group one price for Steppenwolf, one price for Deep Purple. At this rate, said the promoter, I expect to hear about a Beatles tour any day now. So it gives you another sense for how much this was kind of happening at the time. So the next thing is, in the summer, they had actually gone into the recording studio and laid down some tracks to actually record an album. And this is where things start to really get a lot of attention, because Deep Purple's management did not, as much as the shows bothered them, they did not want an album by Deep Purple coming out. So there's a few tracks that they recorded. They recorded Hush. They recorded a song called All I Am Is Blue, Hold On Me, Blood Blister, Drum Boogie, or is it Brum Boogie? I think it's Brum Boogie. I don't even know what that means. I have a version of, so one of these songs that would have been on the new Deep Purple album, which is called All I Am Is Blue. I have a a video of Tony Flynn performing this in Mexico in July of 2015 with his group, the Bluescasters. So let's take a listen.
Is that him there on the left?
That's him on the guitar, yeah, on that Gibson SG. Nice little blues tune. Doesn't sound very Deep Purple, but
yeah. I can picture Rod singing this.
Yeah.
Better than Place in Line.
Yeah, it's a standard blues number, but you know, just it's a good blues number. Just wanted to play a few seconds of that, give you an idea of imagine what would have happened, or imagine really what happened to those recordings. Are they still out there?
So that was him performing a song that was written
and recorded for Deep Purple. Well, the new Deep Purple back in 1980. So the word of this album getting recorded gets out, and as you can imagine, Deep Purple's management is not happy about it. And this is when the lawsuits start happening, and some quotes. These quotes are all over the place. John Lord in 2008 interview says that the last time I saw Rod was across a courtroom. I had to go in and appear in court because it had to be stopped because it just wasn't Deep Purple. Rod Evans says in a November of 1980 interview in Connect magazine, says, it's unbelievable that as soon as they see one is earning a few dollars honorably with a product that I formed, and which I have not only refused royalties from record sales and any involvement, now leave the bush and cut us into pieces. They have the money and we do not. And I wonder, now as they won the lawsuit, what the hell will they do with that name? So kind of talking about like, okay, they won the lawsuit, they got the money, but why? Like, why couldn't we just do this?
Well, 4 years later, we find out.
Exactly. John Lord, same magazine, November 1980, probably same issue. John Lord says, we did not want anything with Deep Purple, and everyone was involved in different projects. I think Rod Evans was in his right because the name had been abandoned, but there were so many legal concerns hidden that this became a complex battle, and they lost. I wish the best of lucks. Jeff Emery says, I think most of the animosity came from Ritchie Blackmore, who I believe had a deep dislike for Rod. Then there were English businessmen who really owned the Deep Purple business. Ritchie Blackmore said a little bit around the time of the lawsuit in 1980 in Sounds magazine, interviewed by Pete Makowski. Pete says, are you annoyed by the new Deep Purple? Ritchie says, no, I think it did annoy me for about a day. I was just reading the interview with Rod Evans in Sounds, and he hasn't changed. He's really a nice guy. There's no malice intended. He probably wanted to make some money out of it. which he felt he might not have done in the beginning. But that's all over now. And the lawyers are in, and that's been stopped. So you get kind of a taste for some of the stuff going on. Ian Paice says, "We didn't make that money. It all went to the lawyers involved. The only chance to stop that band was to sue Rod, and he was the only one receiving money. All the others were on wages. Surely Rod did get involved with some very bad people." So I guess the reason Rod took the brunt of the legal problems because he was kind of the name with it, and everyone else was just kind of being paid as band members. So probably much better for the rest of them.
Yeah, but it sucks for Rod, though.
Yeah, it really sucks for Rod. There's a lot more quotes here, but you can really check them on the website. But I think this will sum it up. So Evans was sued for damages, which were $672,000 US, which is about $2 million in today's money, for using the band name without permission. So that was $168,000 in actual damages and $504,000 in punitive damages. He was unable to pay this, obviously. So he had to forfeit all future royalties from the albums and singles by the Mark I lineup of Deep Purple. And this pretty much just completely ended his career. And this is when he truly, even though he ghosted Captain Beyond, this is when he truly vanished. And nobody really, to this day, knows what's going on with him, other than that email we got from someone who spoke with Nick Simper and said that he's bald-headed living in California with his daughters.
I still like that they just like threw that unnecessary fact in there, almost like a dig.
Right. I hope he's happy, and I hope he's having a good life. And
yeah,
I know I'm not alone in thinking this, but I would love to interview him and talk to him. And just, I mean, he was there during the critical moments and starting of the band, and we have a really big appreciation for what he's done and what he did with the band, and especially what he did with Captain Beyond, which was phenomenal.
Oh yeah, I mean, if I had to ask him about anything, it would just be about Captain Beyond.
Yep.
I mean, I would love to hear about the recording of that album, and I mean, he was phenomenal on it. That's like my favorite Rod performance, but just him starting Deep Purple, his thoughts on it, like the original Deep Purple, of course. Yep. That would be, that's all like history right there, like rock history. So, hey, if you're out there, Rod, give us a call.
Yes, please. So interesting. Before the controversy, so this is kind of an interesting thing, and I don't know. Nobody will ever know, but basically, you had all the members of Deep Purple not really wanting to have anything to do with Deep Purple being over. You have this controversy happen, this big lawsuit. People in Deep Purple start talking to each other again. And a few short years later, they get back together. So I can't help but wonder, did this spur Deep Purple to get back together? Did this start it up? There's no way to know. But
interesting theory.
A few quotes that I picked out. One is Ritchie Blackmore in 1978 says, "Deep Purple is a thing of the past, and I don't want to have another experience like that again." Two quotes after this happened. So that was before. After this happened in late 1980 and middle of 1981, Ian Gillan says, "One day I'd really like to work with Ritchie again, and maybe it'll be with Purple. I don't know." So this was during the controversy. Then after the controversy, John Lord says, "I think there's an excellent opportunity for Deep Purple to meet again in the near future." He said that in Connect magazine in 1981.
Mm-hmm.
So did all of this talk and all of this getting together spur Deep Purple to get back together?
Well, who knows? They could have been. Obviously, we talked about how the growing success, or at least the attention that new Deep Purple got, is what even brought them to everybody's attention. So you wonder if they saw that and said, "Hey, there's still a market for us."
Yeah.
Like if they did that well, imagine how we'd do.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And they very well they did.
So then just a final little segment, kind of where are they now with all of these guys that were in this new Deep Purple? And I love all these clickbait websites that are always like, they pop up in Google. They're like, where are they now? Ian Gillan. I'm like, what the hell? What do you mean, where is Ian Gillan? They always bring up people that everyone knows where they are. But this is people that you don't know necessarily, or you might not know at least.
Well, we've already covered Rod, so we know where he is, or we don't know where he is.
It's always someone that is just like, that you'd never thought a second ago. Like, where are they now? Keanu Reeves. Like, what? It's just always these weird ones. But so we got Rod Evans, obviously the first one. Nobody really knows. It was reported that he was married in 1988, and we read this in a previous episode, but our listener Norman wrote in to say that he met Nick Simper and asked him about Rod, and his answer was, where is he? That's the $100 billion question. As far as I know, as my daughter is friends with somebody who is close to Rod's kids, he is alive, doing well, living in California, retired, bald-headed, and totally out of the music biz. You love the bald-headed dig.
I still think that's a great dig.
It is. So Tony Flynn, our guitar player, after the new Deep Purple, Tony Flynn had plans to record a solo album in Mexico with Rod Evans and Goldie McJohn from Steppenwolf and Jeff Emery, but this never happened, or it's unclear. It's unlikely that Evans and McJohn participated, but he might have recorded some. He released a CD in 1990 called Angel's Breath under the name Anthony R. Flynn. He also was an actor. He was in a movie called Romancing the Bride with Laura Prepon and Carrie Fisher, credited as Tony Flynn. So he's got a little IMDb reference there if you look it up. He did this live concert. I'll put a link in the show notes. Oops, it looks like I'm accidentally playing it now. I'll put a link in the show notes of him doing a Deep Purple kind of tribute show. I've got a link in the show notes of him with the Mountain Men performing Ring That Neck. And then one video I'm going to show is him doing this Spanish guitar, which is kind of really interesting. It's called, he'll be the third Deep Purple member to have something called Fandango. So it says Fandango Music. It's a flamenco guitar by Tony Flynn. So it just looks like him in his little work area. He's got some pretty good flamenco chops there.
Is there a picture of Jesus in the background?
It looks like several pictures of Jesus.
Oh, wow. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, like a little work area, it looks like. Plugging his acoustic guitar, like acoustic electric in. Has some sort of a delay effect on it. So anyway, this is just a little snippet of, he does have some videos out there, and I'll put a link in the show notes of that, and then some stuff of him playing with the various bands. Then we've got Tom Rivera, the bass player. He allegedly retired from the music business after that Deep Purple tour. There's word that he played with a band called Soul Purpose in South Orange County, California in 2006. And they do have a video of one of their rehearsals, them playing No Matter What. And looks like it's being recorded in like a living room.
Yeah.
It's him on bass and singing.
It sounds like he's got some pipes.
Yeah, he's got a really great voice. And they played around a little bit, I guess, but I don't think it got very far. The drummer from the band has some stuff to say on that new Deep Purple site. Not very complimentary about Mr. De Rivera. I guess being difficult to work with or whatever. Yeah, but pretty good singer. I'm just more blown away by the fact that their living room is big enough to hold a band rehearsal. Dick Jurgens III, unfortunately, passed away in 2006 from cancer. And there's a little tribute on the site for him. Jeff Emmerich is a little more difficult to track down. He was the record executive, founded a Statue Records under the name Jeffrey England, and he formed a band called England 402, who released an album on that label. And then he worked as a producer for a band called Ringleader, which I'm going to play right now. So this is Ringleader. The White Heat is the name of the song, featuring Jeffrey England.
This is so gloriously 80s.
Yes. The album name is If Licks Could Kill.
Ha!
It's the 80s, so I don't think they're talking about guitar licks. Isn't that reverb on that voice? Holy crap.
Oh man, this whole recording is soaked in reverb.
Yes. It's amazing how many bands like this existed at that time. And of course, I'm not going to ask you if you ever heard of Ringleader, because of course you didn't.
You're right, I've never heard of Ringleader. Ha! He's just laughing. He's laughing at you.
Isn't that kind of like the trope with the Paul Stanley songs? Like it's like talking about being used and abused by a woman, but like loving it. Like the recurring theme.
No, well, definitely, like, he's had some, those have been some themes running through the songs, but he's never really said that he's loved it. Just that he's, like, he survived it.
It's like, I thought it was like you just couldn't resist it or whatever it was.
But yeah, I mean, very, very similar to a lot of 80s stuff. A lot of 80s stuff.
Yeah, it's just amazing. And when you listen to it, you're like, that could have been
Something.
I mean, that could have been something. It's like, who makes the decisions of how does Motley Crue make it, but Ringleader doesn't? You know, is it any worse than early Motley Crue? I mean, it sounds like the same kind of comes from the same mold, you know?
Yeah.
So anyway, that is the new Deep Purple. Hopefully you learned something new about that era. Hopefully it was informative. It's definitely a little bit of a different show for us, but it was very interesting, something we've been talking about for a long time and something that needed to be covered. We didn't want to just jump right into Perfect Strangers. We needed to cover this era too.
Yeah, I mean, if you could call it an era.
Yeah. It's an era, not necessarily of Deep Purple, but it's an era.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely part of like the history. It's part of the story. Even if it's like kind of a sideline or a side chapter or what have you, but it's definitely interesting. I mean,
and I like to think that it was the catalyst that kind of started the ball rolling on getting this reunion back together.
For
and maybe it wouldn't
Mark II.
And maybe it wouldn't have happened. We know that Gillan coming back after Joe Lynn Turner was driven by the 25th anniversary, and it had to be that lineup and forcing Joe Lynn Turner out. But maybe they would have just gotten back together then, and not at the earlier point. Who knows? It's hard to say. It would have been almost 10 years later if that were the case. Anyway, we do have some news this week. So we kick into the news segment. Something to talk about. So there was an interesting article about with a quote from Steve Vai talking about how the album, the Whitesnake album, Slip of the Tongue, was the first rock record that has a 7-string guitar throughout the entire record.
Well, Steve Vai would know.
He would know. I mean, he was crazy playing, how many years ago was that? 30 years ago? More than 30 years ago, playing 7-string guitar, which still to this day is not by any means commonplace. It's only usually just like really people of Steve Vai level that need a 7th string.
Yeah.
By that token, I think I need 2 strings. Then next up, the big news this week was, this week that we're recording this, is Ian Gillan writes a little thing on Facebook that's in Ian Gillan's voice, which is really enigmatic and confusing. But basically the gist of it, if you read between the lines, is that there is a new Deep Purple album that has just been completed and will be out in the spring of this year of 2020. So it says, a message from Ian Gillan. It was late March in 2019 when I find myself in Nashville, Tennessee, renting an Airbnb delight called Rose River Cottage on one bank of the Cumberland River, almost directly opposite the Grand Ole Opry, from where the quaint music would drift across the water into the wee small hours. It was springtime, and along with the woodchucks, I was emerging from hibernation. Across town, other members of Deep Purple were staying in more urbane accommodations. This was a shock, as we are famous for our lack of planning, and we were all wondered what had drawn us together in this place and time. An even greater surprise was to follow. Each member, arms and legs I'm talking about, Ian Gillan joke, arrived at a rehearsal studio and then a recording studio at roughly the same time on roughly the same day with roughly no idea of what we were doing. It was a total coincidence, the likes of which has probably never been witnessed since. Unbelievably, exactly the same thing happened a few years earlier when we spawned some infinite ideas. Then, blow me down, Bob Ezrin, who is he, Popeye? Bob Ezrin turned up and said, let's have dinner on Monday. Someone inquired, what's the big occasion? Bob replied, to celebrate the fact that we're still alive. In which case, continued the world-wearied muso, we'd better make it Sunday. But we survived the weekend and had dinner on Monday. Tuesday, we made another album. And Wednesday, we went to the pub. Something like that anyway. It was a blur. And now we gird our loins. Yes, I know, but I'm in Africa. I don't know what that means. Oh, we gird our lions. He wrote gird our lions. Huh. For a year of febrile activities into which a rare amount of planning has been invested, obviously not by us. I sense the grinding of campaign wheels, the oiling of creaky roadies, rumors of itineraries and ripples of creativity in Hamburg. Quite plainly, something is in the air, but I have no idea what it could be. Perhaps after another brief hibernation, all will become clear in the spring of 2020. So that's Ian Gillan's way of saying we've got a new album coming out.
Oh, Ian Gillan.
I love all the little lines he threw out, like gird our lions. And he says each member, and then in parentheses, arms and legs I'm talking about.
Oh, my goodness.
And then here's a little close-up. I love this little tease. It's like, it must be photoshopped notepad where he must have written some arrangements and lyrics. And there's a Sharpie sitting on top. The Sharpie's in perfect focus, but they must have applied some sort of blur to all the paper around it so you can't make out any of the words.
Yeah.
And then in the distance is somebody sitting at a mixing board.
Presumably Bob Ezrin.
Presumably. I don't know. Do you think he's even at that level, or is he probably has other people move the faders for him?
Maybe.
You know what I mean? Like he probably has like his ideas and things, but I can't even imagine he's involved on that level. And then in Deep Purple history, we've got a few. Oops. Here we go. So on when this episode comes out, January 6th through January 12th, that week, we'll have a few landmark dates. One is the album Stormbringer will be certified gold in the U.S.
Woo.
after being released that previous November. On January 10th, 2013, Claude Nobbs passes away, which is very sad. Claude Nobbs, the obvious hero of the Montreux Casino fire, who saved all those kids in the basement and everything. Just a real, not only saved all that, but managed to secure them another spot where they would record, because they were supposed to record at the casino, and leading to the Machine Head album. I just realized in the background that poster, that's like clearly Roger Glover.
Yeah.
I didn't notice that at first.
Oh,
It's
Funky
like
Claude.
A cartoon Roger Glover. Funky Claude.
Yeah, it is a cartoon Roger Glover for sure.
And then on January 12th, 1987, The House of Blue Light is released. Which we have yet to get to. And that's all the history. All the stuff we have to as we close up this.
You sound exasperated. You're like,
I didn't think this episode was going to go as long as it did. I guess we had too many tangents.
Well, that's good.
And I think we have to talk going into the new year. Do we want to keep doing these news segments? Do we want to keep doing these history segments? I don't know. Are they?
Well, I mean,
do we just end it? Do we do listener mail? I don't know.
Only time will tell. As we said on our last episode, let you, the viewers, decide, and listeners. Do you want us to keep doing this stuff? Do you want us to go back to the reviewing albums format, a little bit of everything? I like to think that mixing it up keeps it interesting for everybody, including us.
Yeah, and it would be good to not just do album after album after album, but do like an album and do a special show and just throw a few curveballs in there.
I mean, we could like for the next like several years just keep doing albums.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I've said before, if we just cover the albums that Deep Purple members have played upon, that will be 8 years, 10 years, something like that worth of podcasts. So no shortage of material there. But we want to do things a little more interesting too.
Well, this was definitely interesting. I learned a lot more than I knew. It was a lot of the new Deep Purple story I knew, but I learned a few things I did not know.
Yeah, it's good stuff. So I guess until next week, we'll see. I think we're going to be diving back into an album next week. Ooh, but what album will it be? We'll have to wait and see. All right, my friend. Well, I will talk to you next week.
Okay.
All right. Have a good one.
You too.
Thank you for listening to the Deep Purple Podcast. If you like what you hear and would like more episodes in the future, please donate on Patreon to support the show. You can also give us a rating on iTunes to help new people discover the show. You can follow us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook for show updates. See deeppurplepodcast.com for more details. Thank you for listening.